Faith and science. These two topics have been seemingly at loggerheads for many, many years, at least if you believe what a lot of people online will tell you. Is it true that Galileo was actually punished for being anti faith by holding up to the idea of a Copernican system? Is it true that science and faith have constantly been at war? And can people of faith embrace some of the most modern scientific discoveries of today? We're going to be exploring the ideas of faith and science and how these two concepts, these two disciplines, are actually not at loggerheads, but are very good friends. On this, come let us reason together. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to Come Let Us Reason Together. My name is Lenny Esposito. And as I said in the intro, we are looking at a topic that, of course, seems to take over quite a lot of discussion, especially in schools, especially online, with reference to, say, the existence of God, as well as just how we know things. Faith and science have been, of course, both significant playing greater and greater roles in our lives. And Christians are somewhat perplexed as to how to understand and unpack all of the different things that are happening within the scientific community. So in order to tackle this, I have brought in a good friend of mine, Ken Keithley. Ken Keithley is research professor of theology at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina. He occupies the Jesse Hendley Chair of Biblical Theology and is the author of several books, including Faith and Science, A Primer for a Hypernatural World. He's also written 40 Questions on Creation and Evolution, as well as Salvation and Sovereignty, a Molinist Approach. Now, he and his wife Penny have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren now. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you with me.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, we've been able to get together yearly at some of the conferences and things like that, but we've never had you on as a guest, so I'm actually really excited about talking about some really important issues. And of course, this is something that's pretty significant. First of all, as a theologian, can you tell me how you kind of got involved in the idea of science and why that is, the impetus for this new book?
Yeah, well, as a young man, I was interested in all things science, but particularly as a theologian, the doctrine of creation operates as the foundation for understanding both the world and the God who made it. And so we find that the doctrine of creation played a significant role in the development of science as a discipline, and it still does so to this day, even among secularists who perhaps don't realize it.
Okay, so yeah, you see science as actually a kind of in the old way of expressing things. Theology was the queen of the sciences, and of course, understanding the natural world would be a subset of that. So basically, science is really kind of thinking God's thoughts after him, as the expression goes. And in this book, Faith and Science, you talk about it. The subheading is a primer for a hypernatural world. Now, what do you mean by hypernatural?
Well, I went ahead and used 2 categories that I'm not particularly a fan of these categories, and that's the category of natural and supernatural. The categories of natural and supernatural are relatively recent inventions. That is not the way that people have thought about the world throughout most of its history. It's been most of human history. It's been thought of in terms of creator and creation. But since the Enlightenment, the categories that most have used are the categories of natural and supernatural. I'm going to make a concession to that in this book, but then say those two don't exhaust all the conceptual categories, that there's actually a category that goes in between. When we talk about the natural world, we're talking about the world as it is governed by God's general providence. In other words, the world that we perceived empirically through the five senses, this regular world in which things are repeatable, and so therefore we're able to discern the laws of nature. So we call that the natural world. And so a lot of times, whenever we see things happening naturally, rivers flowing down a mountain, things of that nature, we have a tendency to not see God at work there. But I would argue that God is every bit as much working in the natural processes as he is in the miraculous. But setting that aside for now, that would be the natural realm. The supernatural realm would be those activities that we would understand to be signs and wonders, miracles. When Jesus healed the sick, raised the dead, walked on the water, these are things that we would say go beyond what we can understand according to the laws of nature, and we would understand these to be supernatural events. And so that would be the distinction between natural and supernatural. However, what we're seeing in both scripture and in the empirical world is that there is this realm that is in between. That is, there are those things that can be described in natural terms, but they're so unlikely, they're so fortuitous, they're so remarkable that we can't explain them as to have happened by chance. They are extraordinary. And so the Bible describes that that place where the natural world and the supernatural world meet and overlap. And in that Venn diagram where they overlap, I'm not the one to originate the expression hypernatural. There are others who have used the term before me, but that realm of overlap, we call that somewhere in between. It's the hypernatural world. It's something happening in the natural world that cannot be explained merely by the laws of nature. I can give you biblical examples, and then I can give you scientific examples if you want.
Yeah, that would be great. I was just going to ask you, can you point a couple of places in the Bible where this shows up?
Yeah, the probably one of the best places is in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus and Peter owe the tax for the temple. And Jesus tells Peter, go to the Sea of Galilee, cast in a hook. Their first fish you catch will have a gold coin in it that will be able to pay the tax for both of us. All right. Fishing is natural. Lakes are natural. Catching fish are natural. Gold coins are natural. There's nothing in that what he just said that we'd say, okay, what is supernatural about this? Well, it's everything's natural. However, let's face it. I mean, I have fished all my life, and I have caught fish that had something else in their mouth, but it's never been a gold coin, and it's never been at the time that I needed it to go pay for my taxes. And so it is such a remarkable thing that it goes beyond anything that we could describe in merely natural terms. So we would describe that as a hypernatural event. Sometimes theologians will say this is an example of special providence, or perhaps they will say it is something that is miraculous used by involving secondary means. Others examples of this would be when God parted the Red Sea for Moses. Now, it doesn't say that God did it immediately. It says that he sent a wind, an east wind, and that the wind did this work. And so there are those, I've read articles where they talk about certain places in the Red Sea that if a wind blew for so many hours in one direction, it would have the effect and there would be dry land. Okay, let's say that is how it happened. To have it happen exactly when you need it to happen, exactly when Pharaoh's army is headed towards you at the time God said it would happen. This is a hypernatural event. And so there are examples after examples of this. Um, there are examples of the prophets being able to tell when a baby was going to be born or who was going to die in a battle, or other things that we would say, well, look, babies are born all the time and people die often in battles. Yes, but being able to predict precisely what's going to happen. This is what makes this a hypernatural event. So scripture is filled with examples that we'd say are not just direct, immediate miracles, but they are more something that would be hypernatural. Now, going over into the realm of science, we find that there are examples that fit this very well. Perhaps the clearest that is accepted with the broadest consensus is the fine-tuning of the universe. How that this universe, the constants of nature, seem to be on a razor's edge, and not just one, but dozens and dozens of these examples. And so it's not just something on the razor's edge. Our universe seems to be a razor upon a razor upon a razor upon a razor. And it's just extraordinary, this universe that we are in. It's a very, now, I've not appealed to anything supernatural there. It is an extraordinary natural event, hypernatural. And so I'm saying that we live in a world that we have general providence and we have miracles. But we also have that overlapping band in which God's special providence operates in such a way that really calls out for attention.
Well, I think that's a pretty good summation, and there's a lot to go into that. So and we'll do so. You have 9 chapters that you kind of teased out these concepts, and I am reminded of the old joke of a first year freshman, rural Christian student attending college and enrolls in a science class, and of course the professor wants to disavow him of all of his superstitious beliefs. And so he sees the kid, and the kid's reading, and he says, "I can't believe this. This is the miracle of Moses crossing the Red Sea and God drying up the Red Sea." And the professor says, "Well, you realize that's probably not translated very well. There's the Sea of Reeds, and it can only be, say, 18 inches deep. And so it's really not that much of a miracle in order to claim that, oh, well, you're the professor. You should know." He goes, "Okay," and he feels pretty good about himself as he's walking away, one less, deceived individual, until he hears the student scream all the more loudly, "Oh, hallelujah! Praise be God! What a miracle!" And he quickly snaps on his heels and says, "How is it that you're saying this? Didn't I just tell you that this is, didn't have to be a miracle? It's very shallow, painful." "I know, and it says right here that God killed all of Pharaoh's army in 18 inches of water. What a miracle!" So
yeah. Well, you use the context of a university, and that really is the motivation for writing what I've written. When I wrote this, I was thinking of a high school student who is interested in the STEM field, or the entering university student who is a biochemistry major or whatever. This is not, it has apologetic elements, but this is not merely an apologetics book. Really what I wanted to have was, are to equip students with, believing students who are entering into whatever STEM field it is, science, technology, math, understanding that this is what God has gifted me to do. I feel God's call or a vocation to go into this. How do I glorify the Lord as a person of faith? Do I have to somehow compartmentalize my faith? Do I have to put my brain at the door? And what I'm wanting to hopefully accomplish with this book, and that's why it's a primer. It's not a big book. It's only about a little over 100 pages. Is that it equips them with a biblical understanding of creation. That science asks the how question, theology asks the why question. And those are two different types of questions, and we understand that Christianity has always a productive and friendly role with the development of science. There have been some hiccups. You mentioned Galileo. We could talk about Darwin. The two that I talk about in the book are Galileo and the Scopes monkey trial, which, by the way, next year is the 100th anniversary of the Scopes monkey trial.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I wanted a high school or college student who is, like I said, taking whatever, biochemistry or biology or something of that nature, and give them the theological understanding of okay, here's how God operates in the world, and so science is doing something very wonderful. It's good to love science. It's good to be passionate about science, to throw oneself into this without fear that somehow your faith is going to be at risk. And so I do go through the Big Bang. We talk about how it fits very well within a Christian understanding of God creating the world out of nothing. It doesn't prove it, but it fits very congruently. The idea of the fine-tuning of the argument, or the fine-tuning argument, and how it fits very well that the idea that the universe was very lovingly made by a good God, and the rare earth hypothesis. Here's where I use a lot of the work that's been done by Hugh Ross. He's done some excellent work in this area. And then I go ahead and talk about things like the origin of life, and biology, how messy the biological world really is. Then I end the book with a very, as best I can. Here's where the Baptist preacher in me comes out, in which I really do challenge the young man or woman who is in this field to truly commit to glorifying Jesus Christ in their endeavors. I don't want to. You don't want to try to be Billy Graham in a laboratory. That's not what I'm talking about. But to have a confidence to their faith that is winsome, so that they are not intimidated by whatever the latest discovery is. You can't hardly write a book that is going to be able to cover all the bases. Science is developing so very fast. It's very exciting. This is a wonderful day and a wonderful time for a young person to be entering into the scientific realm. I'm very excited for my grandchildren and for others who the Lord may call into working in those fields.
Yeah, and because science plays such a large role in our lives today, it's taken on a mythic status. I when I give these kinds of talks, I tell my students, if you think of three men, if you think of King David, you think of George Washington, and then say just you and I today. In King David's day, they communicated at the speed of hand-carried messenger. They built their clothing, their housing out of the materials that they found around them. And they were able to, travel maybe at the speed of horseback. Mm-hmm. And you advance some 3,000 years to George Washington's day, and you still traveled at the speed of horseback. You still communicated at the speed of hand-carried messenger, and you still built all that you needed from all the materials that are around you. If you just jump another 200 years, now we communicate at the speed of sound, or at the speed of light. We travel at the speed of sound, and we are able to go into the lab and manufacture chemicals based on molecules that we've built. It's truly an amazing, or as one other person put it, 95% of all the scientists who have ever lived on Earth are alive today because there's just such an explosion. And we've done things like eradicate smallpox. It's truly an amazing, and it's no wonder that then the scientist almost becomes the high priest of our modern culture, because what he's done, especially with medicine, and air conditioning and things of that nature. It has not simply made our lives easier, but actually and made our lives better and lengthened our lives and given us things that were heretofore thought impossible. However, because of that, then you have this kind of lapse into a scientistic idea that the science is the imprimatur of all that is true. It's the primary, right, as even Stephen Hawking put in his book The Grand Design, that the philosopher's role is dead. It is the scientist who's taken the primary role of knowledge and understanding today. And you have to say, well, wait a minute, that's not, science deals with the natural world, but that's one small slice of the larger reality. In your chapter 2, matter of fact, Christianity and the Scientific Revolution, this kind of comes to the fore, right? This is the tension. And you mentioned Galileo, and we should talk about scopes, because that was as much a showpiece as it was a legal dictum. And of course, we could also point to Dover in 2007, the Dover trial on Stephen Meyer. We had on the podcast previously. We talked a little bit about Dover as well, and he's said, we've come so much farther than Dover. But just because a judge sits and hears a scientist doesn't mean that what that's saying is true. So how can you explain how Christianity actually the assumptions built into the Christian belief system drove the scientific revolution, and how do you understand then the twist and the turn that flipped this idea into science and Christianity being in an adversarial relationship?
Yeah. Well, if you were right in using George Washington as an example of someone, George Washington had more in common in terms technologically with King David than he does with you and me in 2024. He's a very good example, because it's right after he dies that the Industrial Revolution of the early 1800s begins, which also points out that it isn't just science as science, bare naked science, that science operates within a network, a framework of human thinking. And that unless we understand that, in other words, why was it that science, and boy, I'm so grateful for science. Science is, I want to say that I carry the flag for science. I think we ought to promote science as much as we can. But science operates within a cultural framework. And the reason why the Industrial Revolution was able to use the things of science is because there was this system of laws, a democratic Western civilization. I mean, this is one of the reasons why the scientific revolution happened in Northern Europe, was because of the particular things that Christianity brought to the culture. It brought the understanding that we operate within a universe. It's a unified a system that we live in. The ancient pagan lived in this polytheistic kaleidoscope that was completely chaotic. Think about going back to King David, the Old Testament. Think of Naaman, where it talks about him being healed of his leprosy by Elisha. And after he's healed, he wants to go back to Syria, and he has a very weird request. He asks for 3 mule loads of dirt. Now, why would he ask for 3 mule loads of dirt? And the answer is he's thinking like a pagan, a polytheist. He thinks that Israel's God only has power in Israel, that as soon as he steps out of Israel and he's in Syria, Yahweh won't have any more power. So if he puts down Israeli dirt, he's able to pray to Israel's God, and Israel's God will be able to hear him. It's hard for us to get our heads around just how fractured and fragmented the polytheistic understanding of reality is, or was and is in polytheistic cultures even today. The Christian worldview says there is one God who created all things. So this means that we live in a universe. Not, I mean, that's the very idea of the universe. It's one reality. And this one reality has one set of laws. This is why Isaac Newton was able to make this logical leap and say, when he saw the apple drop at his parents' farm, he was able to say the same force that's working on the apple is the same force that's keeping the moon in its orbit. Now, how was he able to make such a conceptual jump? Because he's thinking like a Christian who lives in a universe in which there's one set of laws that apply to both the heavens and the earth. Even Aristotle didn't believe that. And so all of these distinctive conceptual ways of understanding, the Christian way of understanding. Also, there is the understanding of the ethical sanction that God has created us in his image, and he's made us stewards of all that he has made. And so therefore we are to interact with the things of nature, utilize them to the glory of God and to the benefit of humanity. Which that's something that, again, something like the Hindu culture would not understand, that there's somehow humans are in this place and that it is a good thing for us to do science. Now, there are a lot of Hindus who are scientists today, but it's a fact that we're operating from a Christian way of understanding things. There is a universe, there is a lawgiver. We have the ethical sanction to do this. We also have the responsibility to have to care well for that which God created. All of these things provide then again the idea of a moral framework. One of the reasons why science works so well in today's culture is because we also have a set of laws in which we say right and wrong. Here are the ethical ways in which technology can be used. And we understand that it's unethical, it's immoral to use technology in a deceitful and dishonest way. Where did all of this idea of right and wrong come from? Well, this is where theism kicks in. And so it isn't just bare naked science doing these wonderful things. Very grateful for science and all the wonderful things that it's accomplished. But there's also the framework that gives the conceptual understanding for doing science, the ethical sanction, the moral motivation to do it. This whole idea that we are progressing, that we're moving forward, that we are trying to improve the human condition. That's a very Christian way of thinking. You won't get that from the ancient Romans or the Greeks or anywhere else. This is something that's very much the product of the New Testament. And so I'm not saying anything new here. I am simply popularizing what the work of men like Peter Harrison and Ronald Numbers and David Lindbergh and so many historians of science have all argued long before I did, that we need to recognize just how much science depends upon the Christian worldview in order to function and to continue functioning even today.
Yeah, I've heard the example of the Chinese they discovered gunpowder, but they really didn't do much with it because they didn't have in their worldview the idea that you are to go out and find out its secrets, right? It is the glory of God.
They didn't have a concept of natural law.
Yeah,
and
that there would be a consistency in that.
Yeah, think about it. The Egyptians were able to build pyramids. That's amazing. The Greeks developed geometry. The Romans did all kinds of incredible engineering. The Islamic scholars during the medieval period did all kinds of progress, made all kinds of progress in the area of mathematics. I mean, that's where we get our Arabic numerals and algebra. But this is not something that is unexplored. I mean, there's a lot of historians of science who look at this and say there are reasons why the scientific revolution did not happen in any of those cultures. The Aztec culture, for that matter, or the Inca culture of South America. They made remarkable strides in terms of technology and all kinds of advances in terms of astronomy, but still nothing like modern science as we understand it today occurred in any of those cultures. And that's one of the great questions.
Yeah.
Why? And then the next question is then, okay, where did the wheels go off? The wagon. What happened? Why did we get from the scientific revolution to where we are today? And I'm glad to talk about that too.
Yeah, we have. So when we look at it, I think there are 2 points that we can focus on. The first, of course, is in the Enlightenment period, where you have guys like Immanuel Kant who say reason can be the ultimate goal of humanity, and we can reason. We don't necessarily need to point to God. We through our reason can discover everything. So there was a hubris in that, but that didn't necessarily put science in animus against Christianity at that point. There were Kepler and all Bacon, and there were phenomenal people doing science who were also dedicated churchmen. But really, something happens at Darwin and T.H. Huxley specifically. Yeah. I think
I'm going to push back, Lenny. I think that the damage was done already long before Darwin and Huxley. You have to pay attention that there are people like Thomas Hobbes and David Hume, who, the reason why Kant, or you got to remember, Kant considered himself a Christian. Kant is trying to rescue Christianity from the damage done by David Hume. Hume is living at the time, of George Washington that you talk about. The Voltaire, Diderot, the Hume, the Enlightenment happened 200 years, 150 to 200 years before Darwin. Darwin is the capstone and Huxley is the capstone of something that already happened. I'm gonna put the blame at the feet of Christianity. I think that you have to understand what is going on. After the Reformation, you have the post-Reformation period, and we do have to ask ourselves, why is it whenever in 1521 that Martin Luther stands at the Diet of Worms before Emperor Charles V and says, my conscience is bound by the word of God. I can do no other. And he stands there as someone who is going to employ his conscience, and he says, unless I am convinced by scripture and plain reason, I'm not going to submit to the Pope and the councils. So here you have the Protestant, the Reformation mantra of the individual responsibility under the authority of scripture, and so you have the idea of individual liberty. From 1521, by 1621, we have one French author who laments that Paris, which at that time had about 300,000 people in it, he estimated there were 50,000 atheists. Now, just 100 years, from 1521 to 1621, what in the world happened? I'm gonna say a couple of really bad things happened. And one of the clearest is that when the Reformation happened, the Catholics and the Protestants fought against each other in a way that was, to say that it was horrific doesn't even begin to catch it. Germany lost 1/3 of its population. There are parts of what is today the Czech Republic that lost half of its population. They slaughtered tens of thousands. They would come through and slaughter entire villages. Jacob Arminius, who, we think of Arminianism, the only way he survived was that he happened to be at school when the Catholic soldiers came through in his village and killed everyone in the village, including his entire family, his parents and his siblings. The horror of the religious wars, particularly the 30 Years' War. There was also at this time a witchcraft mania. And during this period, the very same period, they executed anywhere between 1 to 200,000 women and sometimes children as young as 4 years old for being witches. There was such a moral revulsion of the intelligentsia over how Christendom conducted itself during this period of time, that they were just nauseated. And so you have this visceral revulsion that will then look for some type of intellectual justification. I think most atheists today, it isn't just merely an intellectual dilemma. There's also emotional and other very powerful things at work in their hearts and minds. And so I think that we need to recognize that the Enlightenment happened long before. In fact, Immanuel Kant is the end of the Enlightenment. When he wrote in 1805, "What is Enlightenment?" that was pretty much the end. And so I think that we need to recognize the culpability of the church during this period of time. That's the moral dilemma. The second thing that happened is the rise of biblical criticism. David Strauss, others approached the Bible as a merely human book, and any place where it mentioned anything supernatural, they understood. I mean, the whole natural, supernatural, those did not come from science. Scientists did not coin the terms natural and supernatural. Biblical scholars coined the term natural and supernatural. And so Protestant biblical scholars, the reformers said, look, individual responsibility is a scary thing, but any of us under the Word of God can come to know the truth sufficiently that any individual can be saved. Okay, biblical authority, as long as we have the Bible to guide us. What does the next generation of biblical scholars do? They shred the Bible by dismantling it, separating what they consider to be the natural from the supernatural portions of Scripture. So this all happens long before Thomas Huxley or Charles Darwin. I think that Darwin and Huxley popularizes and really does bring it into British and American culture. He really does have an agenda, just like you said. There's a lot going on there with both of them, too, that we could talk about what had happened in their personal lives. But we need to recognize that we have a certain level of culpability within Christianity for the Enlightenment, and then the very strong push against any kind of religious authority.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you that the Enlightenment, and again, kind of a little bit why I brought it up, that the Enlightenment was the first kind of step away from the more theologically driven understanding, right? In Philip Reif's, if you look at his four views, you have, the theological man, which is broadly the medieval period, but once the Enlightenment comes in, then you have the rational man, and that's what he's decrying. And even there, the Enlightenment scholars did not coin the term Dark Ages. No. The reformer, the Protestant apologist, who were denouncing the Roman Catholic claims to miracles. The Roman Catholic Church was claiming certain miracles were happening among the saints, and the Protestant apologists rejected it, calling it that medieval period to be the Dark Ages. The Enlightenment skeptics they said, thank you very much. In fact, someone like David Hume, he actually acknowledges
that he is borrowing from the Protestant apologist. And he says, well, what is true of the medieval Catholic Church is just true of the Bible in general. And so he just generalizes
Just
out.
extrapolates it to the next
Yeah.
level.
And so like I said, Peter Harrison has got a great book called Some New World, in which he spells all this out in great detail. He's not the only one that does that, but he's the one who does it the most thoroughly. And so we have to recognize, and that's why in my little handbook there, the primer, I go ahead and talk about Galileo, and I go ahead and talk about the Scopes monkey trial, because there are those times that we bear some of the responsibility. There's a reason why things are the way they are. It isn't just because some intellectual bad guys decided to think, to do a revolt. I'm afraid we may have given them reason. The church has given plenty of reasons to those outside the church to think that we're less than noble.
So let's go. Let's look at Scopes then, because you have, of course, this famous face-off in Tennessee, a school teacher, and like most. If folks don't know, and the movie does not do the actual history justice at all. The movie's
not at all
a hit piece. It is. It
is.
Clearly is. But the trial itself was a show trial, and if you've ever done any investigation even into pro-life work and Roe versus Wade, it follows a standardized script. You find someone, especially those who are pushing for a different outcome or a progressive outcome, you find someone to be your representative, right? So it's Jane Warrow with Roe versus Wade, and it's in this Tennessee teacher who just wanted to teach evolution as one of the possibilities, right? This theory is out now. It's been out for some 70 years, 60 years. And he wanted to present it as one of the open options. And the school system, the law, I think, is in the state of Tennessee was you couldn't do so. And so they started trying this gentleman for breaking that law. And they brought in the popular lawyers of the day, the celebrity lawyers, right? The Gloria Allreds or But when they brought them in, William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow, maybe the defense or maybe the prosecution didn't bring in the right guy. And tell me a little bit about Bryan and what you say with Scopes.
Yeah, as you point out, John Scopes, he never taught biology. I mean, he was a high school coach, much less taught Darwinism. He just permitted himself to be the foil. And Tennessee decided to pass a law that forbid the teaching of evolution, which I don't hardly know of any creationist today that would say that's a good idea.
No, we'd love to go back to Scopes. Hey, teach them both. Everybody would love that.
Yeah. So and to your point, whenever he was going to be tried, and of course they decided to have it at Dayton. Again, this was all. It was intended to be the circus. I mean, that's what they were trying to do. Clarence Darrow was the famous defense lawyer. He was the Perry Mason or Matlock, or I don't know who would be the famous defense lawyers of today, but he was particularly famous for being a defense lawyer. So he said he would defend him. William Jennings Bryan, who was a 3-time Democratic candidate for president, very devout Christian, but very much on the progressive side of things. People forget that William Jennings Bryan was not a conservative. He certainly wasn't a fundamentalist. He was a progressive, both politically and in many ways theologically. He was not a young Earth creationist. I mean, that's one of the more bizarre things is during his testimony on the stand is why he said and did some of the things he did. He was very much a pulpiteer, if you will, a politician. But he said he would be the show prosecutor, and here's somebody who was held to an old Earth. I mean, he was not young Earth. He was open to the idea of speciation. In fact, he was open to the idea of evolution, other than human evolution. So you think, okay, what in the world is it that's motivating William Jennings Bryan the way it is? Well, social Darwinism. It's hard for us to grasp just how the idea of Darwinism caught the public's and the intellectual mind. And so they were applying Darwinism to everything. Communists and fascists believed that their political systems was simply Darwinism applied to the political realm. Marx would.
Buck versus Bell was decided, I think, just a year earlier that said that you have to sterilize the imbecile in order to keep the gene pool clean, and that stayed till the 70s even.
Yeah, people forget that the whole notion of eugenics had its origin really was here in the United States, and in fact, the fascists thanked the state of California for the model that they provided in terms of eliminating unwanted imbeciles. And so Jennings was very rightly disturbed. There were capitalists who would involve themselves in the most predatory type of capitalism imaginable, running monopolies. And they just understood that to be Darwinism at work in the economic world. And so what William Jennings Bryan was worried about, what really had him disturbed, was not the scientific side of it, but the cultural and social side of it. Now, he made the mistake of deciding that that I'm going to have to go attack it at the way that he did. And without a doubt, the turning point of the trial is whenever Darrow surprised everyone by calling William Jennings Bryan himself as a witness. And there, during the examination or cross-examination, whatever you want to call it, it didn't go well at all. It was very clear that Bryan, that was one of his worst days. And in fact, he dies like just a week afterwards, and people wonder just how much the stress of that had to do with it. That was a debacle. Even though the court ruled in favor of Bryan, in the public perception, Darrow won hands down. And so that was very much a low point for evangelicalism in general and creationism in particular.
So, yes, I agree with all of that. But what has happened since, say, really since the 1980s? There was a movement in the 60s called creation science, of course. Yeah. You know that. But something different started showing up, especially after the 80s. And interestingly, one of the kind of most interesting, and you noted here in chapter 5, was a book by two secular scientists, Barrow and Tipler, called The Anthropic Cosmological Principle, where they argue, anthropos, of course, means human. And they say basically the cosmos seems to be built in such a way for mankind to exist. It seems to be ordered so that we can have people. It's kind of like if you're going to buy a fish, you can't just buy a fish. You got to, first of all, make sure you have an aquarium. And it can't just be any aquarium. You got to treat the water, right? Anybody who's ever won one of those dumb goldfish for their 6-year-old daughter and you bring it home, you know that free fish is about $200 because you got to go buy the filter and the food and the right plants and you got to keep the water just at the right levels and do this and that. You have to set it all up so that the fish will survive. And our universe shows those signs. And what's been going on is as our instruments have become more sensitive, as our understanding of the balance of nature has become more distinct, we're finding more and more of these, like you say, razor's edge upon razor's edge. First, the fine tuning of the universe, and then Ward and Brownlee put out a book in the 1990s, The Rare Earth. And then Guillermo Gonzalez and J. Wesley Richards puts out, where they talk about how planet Earth is the privileged planet. It's got a viewpoint toward the rest of the universe. And so more and more we're starting to see in the construction of the universe God's fingerprints all over them. And that's an
Yeah.
interesting turning point because it actually kind of starts from the secular side.
Yeah, that's the surprising thing about this. It's very serendipitous. It's not that fundamentalist or Bible believing theologians said, I think the universe is fine tuned. No, it was very much a scientific something that arose, as you point out, within the scientific community. Um, and I think it's interesting that you fingerprints. Hugh Ross has got a great book called The Fingerprints of God. Michael Strauss, who is a particle physicist also a believer, has written about this. And both of them argue that it takes a universe as big and as old as it is in order for life on Earth, or life like we have on Earth, to exist anywhere. Because the elements that we have in this on this planet, it isn't just that we have water and carbon. I mean, we also have iron and zinc and all of these heavier elements that require multiple generations of stars in order to create these elements in significant quantities. That we have them here on Earth. So it would take billions of years for these kinds of things to happen. Our planet, our solar system, has to be in a rather special place in the galaxy in order to not to be too far in, so that we have the problem of cosmic rays, not so far out that the only elements that we have are hydrogen and helium. So we have to be we have to be in just the right place. There are those who have written about this much more than I have, but as you point out, I have one little chapter where I just kind of give a snapshot of the arguments that they make, and I think what it did is that it's a reasonable thing to believe that we are in a world that enjoys God's providential care.
So there's a lot there. I mean, you have, of course, the Goldilocks principle that has been talked about as well. But I can imagine some people who kind of enjoy science fiction talk about, well, there should be life on many other planets. What about the Drake equation? They would say, and usually the primary response to that is, for the Drake equation, they're all multiples, and all it takes is for one of those to be zero, and the answer is then zero.
Yeah.
So what do you say to folks who are saying, well, it wouldn't? What about life elsewhere?
Well, I am agnostic about whether or not there is any life anywhere else in the universe. I mean, God often does things that, we know God is doing all kinds of things He's not telling us about. But what Brownlee and Ward point out, as you say in the book there, in their book, in Rare Earth, are as J. Wesley Richards and in his Privileged Planet, it statistically comes down to, my goodness, it could work out very much that it took something as big as this universe, and as old as this universe, in order for there to be life just one time. Hugh Ross has a book that has just come out in which he points out that there are entire galaxies that we don't have to wonder. We know there's no life in them because they have a very active black hole that is in the center of them that's gobbling up stars. And every time it gobbles one up, it releases enough gamma radiation to not only kill everything in it, in the whole galaxy, but enough to kill everything in another galaxy or two over. And so, I mean, sadly enough, we can look at a lot of these beautiful galaxies and know there's nothing that resembles biochemical life in them because of what's going on in terms of cosmic radiation. We live in a very special galaxy. The Hugh Ross really does point out that the Milky Way is not just a run-of-the-mill galaxy. It has so many remarkable features that it's very special. Where we're at in its cluster of galaxies is very special. Where we're at within it, we're not
On
in
one of
one
the
of the
spiral
ends.
arms, I think we're 2/3 away from one of the spiral arms, so we're not. Yeah, we don't have, as you say, cosmic radiation. Also, we can have day and night. We can actually
Yeah,
have.
think if we'd have been in one of the dusty arms where everything we see looks like fog, that we'd never seen a single star. We wouldn't even know the stars are up there. Um, think about how that would hinder a human progress. That we didn't even have the cosmos to be aware of it. I mean, it'd almost be like being in this cave where we don't even know what else there is. The things that we enjoy at this planet, begin to realize, they talk about Earth-like planets and yet what they're talking about is its particular size or whether it's in the habitable zone. Getting all of those things just right, it's quite remarkable. There's a world of difference between something that is lifelike and something that is alive. And so it is, there's a world of difference between something that is Earth-like and something that actually has all the properties of Earth. And we are in a very remarkable place indeed. I do believe the Sermon on the Mount is applicable, that we are experiencing our Father's good care.
Well, beyond the universe, you point out in the book about life itself. When we go from the very, very large to the very, very small and start looking at how the different aspects of life are all interreliant, how you can get something living from non-living, how you can cut conscious from non-conscious material. The idea of DNA being an error correcting code, and how DNA relies upon RNA replication, and RNA replication needs DNA in order to function. And how does all that, how this is the other aspect of like where truly those who would hold to just a material framework are stuck. There is simply not even a model that exists for
Yeah,
life.
and just remember the purpose of the book is like I said, it's not an apologetics. I mean, there's others who have done much better work in terms of apologetics than I have. I've just given a brief chapter to each one of those things. The goal I have is I'm thinking in my mind the young Christian who is serving God in this area and saying, okay, how is it that I am supposed to approach or to be thinking as a Christian? How do I, and I want Christian biologists to do their work as an act of worship. I want Christian geologists and Christian engineers and geneticists to be able to feel God's pleasure doing what they're doing, that they don't feel intimidated by the secular culture. They don't feel like they have to hide their faith. They are able to do what they're doing joyously, with the freedom and liberty of knowing this is my Father's world. And so therefore, I want to be able to do these things knowing that, yes, I am studying the mundane regularities of and utilizing that so that we might improve the human condition by increasing knowledge, utilizing it to find technologies, medicines, all of these things, being able to do this, saying, by so doing, I'm advancing the kingdom of God in my life and in this realm, because Jesus is Lord in every arena, including the scientific arena.
So you bring this to a good close, because part of the idea that we need to really communicate, first of all, is, and I tell people this all the time, science tells us nothing. Science is a procedure. It's a way to understand. It's a process that one goes through. You use the hypothesis and falsification and things like that in order to do the best way to discover what you can prove. So scientists are the ones who say things. Science doesn't tell us anything. Scientists do. They interpret the data. And, science can show us how to clone a man. It can never tell us if we should, right? It's the scientist who does that. And that's where our faith plays an important role.
We need to remember, and this is something that gets conflated in popular discussions. Science, when we talk about science, we're talking about three different things. One, we're talking about, as you just said, a methodology. That's an approach to the material world. Second, it is also a body of knowledge. We say, okay, this is what we have discovered in astronomy or in chemistry. But third, it's an institution. It is a communal effort, and so therefore that makes it very much an ethical enterprise. And so there are times that we conflate it and say you need to believe the science. Well, what do you mean? Science is not a person, and so remembering those three, and I briefly spell those out in the book. Let's remember that whenever we're talking, same thing is about the Christian faith. We have the way of approaching things, looking in Revelation. Then we also have a body of work. I'm a theologian, and then third, we have the community of faith, which is the institution. And so it is with science. It is a methodology. It's a body of knowledge, and very importantly, it is also an institution. And so remembering that helps us in thinking about this well.
Oh, I completely agree. Well, I think that's a great spot to end on, Ken. I appreciate your time so much. It's been a great discussion. There's so much here still to talk about, but we'll have to do it again at some other time. So thank you so much, and God bless you. And we'll put the link to the book below this video. People can pick it up, and it's available on Amazon and all these other places. Great short read, as you say, really helpful for really just even the general Christian who's kind of mystified about all these different things that are going on. Might give you a little bit of clarification, but especially those who are showing a penchant for science, perhaps in high school or even sophisticated junior hires, because they're going to be facing these questions definitely as they continue in their education. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.